Unwillingly forced into becoming galactic explorers, a small community of scientists, engineers, and support staff in a small base clinging to an airless moon fly through the cosmos. They're looking for a new home, but first they'll have to survive encounters with powerful alien races, many of them seeking to prey on the humans, or bizarre cosmic phenomena, or dangerous planets. 70s TV series Space 1999 promised a lot. It has been rediscovered by future generations of fans, but like Moonbase Alpha itself, the journey would be far from smooth. Hello, I'm Gareth Preston, and this is Very British Futures, the series about UK science fiction television. This time we're looking in at one of the big beasts in this television niche, Space 1999. Probably the best known of Gerry Anderson's television series after Thunderbirds, and the last one he co-produced with Sylvia Anderson. Donning their Rudy Genrich-designed unisex uniforms and strapping on their comlinks are two accomplished writers and commentators, Ian Taylor and Kara Dennison. Writer Ian has previously joined me to discuss The Nightmare Man, while Kara, a regular contributor to the Crunchyroll anime website, and is the author of many short stories, amongst many other things, is making her debut on this series. So it's a welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
It's great to have you here on this one. Where it's initially on this series, I was going to go a bit more obscure, but I've kind of relaxed it a bit because I think people are interested in hearing what people think about the bigger series as well that they've actually heard of. Hence, Space 1999 is coming up. Now, with a whole series to cover, I've asked both of them to pick a particular episode they wanted to talk about, as I have, and I should warn you there will be spoilers. Space 1999 premiered in 1975 and ran for 2 seasons. Initially, it was planned as the second season of Anderson's previous series, UFO, to be set entirely on the moon base. But a fall in American ratings for UFO led to ITC asking them to develop a brand new show. At the time, it was trumpeted as the most expensive drama series on television. It tells the story of the inhabitants of Moonbase Alpha, a scientific research center on the moon in the year 1999. However, a catastrophic accident causes the moon to break away from Earth's orbit and hurtle into deep space, with the moon-based inhabitants struggling to survive as they encounter strange new worlds and alien races. The show was popular in the UK, despite never receiving a coveted ITV national time slot, rather being shown at various times across the regions. It was widely syndicated in the USA to local stations. As with other ITC shows, it employed many actors and creatives from the British film industry, whilst aiming firmly at the lucrative American market. The programme was praised for its imaginative stories and impressive special effects, both clearly influenced by 2001: A Space Odyssey, whilst at the same time criticised for stiff acting and a lack of humour. As a result, the second season, often called Year 2 by fans, saw American producer Fred Freiberger brought in with a remit to make the show more appealing to US audiences. He had previously overseen the final seasons of Star Trek and The $6 Million Man. He altered the regular lineup of characters and commissioned more action-orientated storylines, claiming that too many of the Year One episodes had been just people talking. Although Gerry Anderson, now executive producer, supported Friedberger, his lead stars, Martin Landau and Barbara Bain, were unhappy with the new direction, and ratings failed to improve, leading to cancellation. The show starred Martin Landau, Barbara Bain, Barry Morse, Tony Anholt, Nick Tate, and Catherine Schell. So, to start off with, before we get into the individual stories, I'm going to start by asking you, how did you first encounter Space 1999? And I'm going to start off with Ian.
Right. Well, I was a kid at the time, 5 years old, when it launched in September 1975. But then again, it was, I guess, subject to varied regional broadcasts in the UK. So I couldn't tell you exactly when I watched them. I know it's highly likely it was a Saturday morning, I think, which is actually surprising when I think about it in some ways. But I have clear memories of watching it, but just episodes here and there, and series one and series two that are quite different. They're all kind of mixed up a little bit. Now, I know that from May 1973, I can remember virtually every single story from Doctor Who onwards. But Space 1999, I remember certain parts of it very clearly, but not necessarily all of it. Maybe I was doing stuff on Saturday mornings. I don't know. But the episodes I saw really, really stuck with me, but I don't necessarily think I saw every episode.
And how about you, Kara?
Well, I'm actually very new to Space 1999. I had heard of it in passing. It's very much a part of the zeitgeist, especially if you're a sci-fi fan. But my first true encounter getting to know what it was, funnily enough, while I was working on the liner notes for the Blu-ray of an anime called Otaku no Video. This was produced in 1991, and it's a mockumentary combined with a fictionalized account of the founding of an anime studio called Gainax. And one of the references buried deep in the show is that any night scenes that took place in the far future segment of the series that took place after September 13th, 1999, there was no moon in the sky. And this was the director's homage to one of his favorite series. He would go on to homage it in future anime like Evangelion by using the date of September 13th. So my awareness of the show happened kind of the long way around through my work. I sat down to it this past summer, actually, and I started watching just from the beginning. I got into it from the first moment, and I went and I told my uncle that I was watching it, and I found out years and years and years after the fact that long ago, my uncle and my dad and my grandfather used to watch it together.
Oh.
My grandfather enjoyed it. He was not very big on the science elements because he strictly wanted all of the science to be very real, but he loved the human stories in it. And I found that's kind of what I like too.
Oh, that's very interesting. I mean, because I know, I don't hope you don't mind me saying, of course, that your grandfather was involved with NASA. He was a NASA engineer. So
he worked on the Viking project. He was a troubleshooter for that, and he worked on a lot of really impressive stuff. And his engagement with science fiction was kind of weird because he wanted the science to be very hard and very real. But once he got past that, the two of us kind of shared the same love of the stories of the people amidst all the science and all the more fantastical stuff.
It's interesting you say it because watching Space 99 again now, I'm sort of struck. There's this constant conflict going on between they want to do serious science and try and make it realistic, and they're constantly bumping up against all these old science fiction tropes and the ITC sort of, we're an entertainment company. And it's an ongoing battle all the way through the series between these two ambitions of theirs. And similarly to Ian, I have mixed memories of I just have flashes. I for some reason, I associate Space 1999 with Sundays, which, given the kind of religiosity of quite a few episodes, seems quite appropriate. And I had annuals, and I had the die-cast dinky toy Eagle, which I absolutely loved,
exactly.
and had lots of fun with. In fact, probably my big take is going to be there's this impression often reported when people cover Space 1989 that the first season is serious and the second season is really silly and daft. To be honest, I think year one is pretty silly, actually. Say it quietly. But because everyone's very, very serious in it, and I think people sometimes they don't notice as much. But I don't think the gap between the two seasons is sometimes as wide as is made out. In my opinion, I don't know what you think of that.
Maybe you're right. I think probably the biggest difference is the opening credits, the costumes, and how on earth did they have such a big refit when they're drifting along in space? Well, other than that, yeah, I mean, there are serious bits, and sometimes being very serious, it might cause you to overlook the silly bits, but sometimes being very serious does come across as silly in its own right.
Yeah.
It all balances out, I think. I think watching through the two series, I think it's a pretty fun ride, no matter what.
Well, I
I
think
mean,
we shall take a dive in, and I think we shall start with an episode. I think that even people who don't know Space 1999 very well, I think if you're talking about the memories, this is an episode that people tend to remember as kind of part of their 70s childhood, really, and beyond. And I'm going to ask Ian to introduce it. So, what is the first episode we're going to be discussing?
right. Well, it is, of course, Dragon's Domain, which I think it's no great surprise, probably, that one of us picked this because it's one of the ones that people always remember. Certainly one that most people who I know of my age group remember in the UK. And that's why, I mean, you might be right that it was shown on a Sunday. I thought maybe a Saturday, maybe a morning. I'm not sure. But this is one that makes me wonder if I'm incorrect because in some ways it's quite creepy. I watched this again the other day with my daughter. She's 10 and she was quite seriously freaked out at some moments in it. So, Dragon's Domain, the story. Let's look at that first. Written by Christopher Penfold and directed by Charles Crichton, a man of much experience. The story opens with Dr. Helena Russell recalling events in flashback as she types out a report. Very 20th century typewriter she's using to type out a report, I should say. She's concerned that Commander Koenig's old friend and professional competitor Tony Cellini is suffering from a combination of guilt, an old school version of PTSD, really. Back before the Moonbase Alpha explosion, Cellini had beaten Koenig to the opportunity of leading a team to explore a newly discovered planet. However, he ended up being the only survivor, he and his team having met an aggressive space monster. First appearing as a barely tangible vision of shining light and 70s special effects, it develops into a one-eyed, many-tentacled creature with a gaping mouth. And one by one, the crew are drawn into the gaping maw and then slid rapidly out again, having been reduced to charred, steaming bones. Did Cellini really experience this, or is it a guilt-fueled hallucination? There's the plot.
So, when you came up to this one in your rewatch, Kara, what struck you first about Dragon's Domain?
So one of my favorite things about Space 1999 is that there's this sort of inexhaustible society of people you can just dig into and pull backstory out of. And I love that every day, every week, we're meeting a new person. And it was very interesting to me to see something told in flashback. Now, I'm still working my way through a lot of the show, but stepping outside of Moonbase Alpha and seeing this very long-standing relationship amongst people and, egos and the way everything is balanced develop. It was fascinating to me, and it was also fascinating to me with my own family history because, I would hear a lot of stories about things like this. Who's the right person for the job? Who can do this, that, and the other? And then seeing this very real and very familiar story turn into a kind of Grimm's fairy tale in the most distressing way was fascinating to me. I love this one. Love this one a lot.
It is. I think it is one of the strongest ones of the series. I think, and I absolutely, and part of that is watching it as a kid. It absolutely terrified me at the time. It was.
I cannot imagine watching this as a kid. I'm watching this as a grown woman and still, granted watching it late at night and still being terrified. I can't imagine being a child watching this.
I mean, the bit where it sort of sucks them into its mouth and then spits them out as these charred bodies is, yeah, I've definitely got a memory of seeing that and being quite horrified.
I was really not expecting that kind of on-screen thing. I was not expecting to see the upshot.
I was 5 years old. If scenes like that had been in a horror film being shown late at night, I wouldn't have been what daytime. Crazy. But there's that argument with regards to what season 1 was like and the second series. There's lots of character interaction, there's lots of talking, there's lots of seriousness, but then you get those scenes, and combination together is wonderful, really. Right, and a great cast. What a great cast of supporting players. I was quite amazed because when I was 5, I wouldn't have had a clue who anybody was. But as Kara says, you get a new character who you discover the backstory of, and you get to know them. And here we've got an Italian actor who was famous for the Sartana spaghetti westerns, appearing in Space 1999. It seems like a crazy thing. And his crew includes Michael Sheard from Grange Hill, Barbara Kellerman, who'd been in all sorts of genre films, and I think she was in the TV version of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as well. And,
oh yes, very memorable as the White Witch.
Oh
that's
yeah,
right. Yeah, Susan Jameson, who she's married to James Bolam, of course, so she was in New Tricks with him, the British detective series, much later on. And Douglas Wilmer, who'd been Sherlock Holmes on BBC in the 60s. Just think how many guest stars are there who are people you would know. I mean, some of them probably better known in the UK, but nevertheless, very impressive.
Yes, I think that is one of the things about Space 99. It every week they keep filling it up with all these great British character actors.
The effects for a television program of that type, I think they're actually really pretty good. You think you're going back to 1975. It was supposed to be the most expensive series of its type at the time, wasn't it? And fair play, the model work and everything like that looks really good.
It is. It's a very impressively cinematic looking show. All of it. What I mean, what do you make of the sort of the production look of it?
I did grow up with some BBC shows. It really was, when I was younger, it was a matter of what PBS chose to buy. So the BBC Chronicles of Narnia was one of them. But the model work is something that has carried over even over here and is beloved by so many. It's inspired a lot of people in their own modern work. And again, going back to my covering anime and other Japanese entertainment, Gerry Anderson's work was instrumental in a lot of special effects things in Japan. I believe the director I mentioned earlier might actually be doing a Thunderbirds film coming up. I'll have to check on that. But yeah, I love that kind of stuff. That's always been very very ingrained in the kind of television that I watched, even with things like Mystery Science Theater, which was on that was like on a basement budget. But there's just something very lovely about really good models executed really well. And It's really gorgeous stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to take time out for a moment to consider the Eagles, which I think are one of the they've become sort of one of the iconic sci-fi spaceships. So the sort of spaceships, if you're doing an encyclopedia of science fiction, chances are, Robbie the Robot and the Space 1999 Eagle is going to be on the cover because it's such a great design because it really looks like it can work, the Eagle. It looks like it's been designed with all that exoskeleton all around it and the sort of vertical takeoff and the sort of little thrusters pointing out in different ways. It really looks like it can work.
Well, it's wonderful how it can land, it can dock, form an airlock, and then it can take off again, leaving behind much of the undercarriage, which serves as a kind of laboratory working space. That it's very clever.
Again,
very clever.
Yeah, that actually feels very realistic. I mean, in a way, that's what the shuttle in the space shuttle, with its you could take different kinds of payloads inside, so it's anticipating beautiful design. I mean, I must say must be incredibly fuel efficient, considering that every week they're taking off, going off to an alien, landing on it, and taking off again, coming back. And we never really find out how many Eagles there are on Moonbase, but there must be a heck of a lot of them.
There are exactly enough Eagles.
Considering the attrition rate they go through.
I was struck watching Dragon's Domain. I was struck by how much wasted space there was on the moon base. Because thinking in the background, it's wonderful how big it is. But you think, well, what's going on over there? There's just a big empty space, and a big empty space over there. I think in series 2, it became a lot more claustrophobic.
That does make more sense.
Yeah, I mean, they were probably saving money on the budget, I guess, but it made more sense anyway, But it looked lovely. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, it's beautiful to look at. I mean, there's a very 2001 influence to the design of Space 1999, and that had these kind of big rolling spaces, especially on the space station. And in fact, the moon base sections on 2001 definitely have more than a little Space 1999 feel to them.
The uniforms are really iconic as well, and it's amazing that in 1999 we were wearing flares and platform shoes and all sorts of things like that. But the one comes home, it's funny when you design a sci-fi uniform, the sort of things you come up with where you think, would anybody really go for that? Right, we're going to invent this uniform and it's going to have one arm that's going to be one colour. It's quite bizarre, but it's something I always remembered very clearly growing up, even when I've not seen the show for years. Always remember that uniform.
The plastic belt.
Plastic belt.
Whenever I look at a sci-fi show of any kind, like my first thought is, what's it like to live within that? We know what it's like to do battle stations, to go to work in it, to do the action scenes. But I'm like, what is it like to be there 24/7? What's it like to go to the hospital there, to sit and read a book there? And the set design is just so intriguing to me, the way they go in and out of places, their little TV communicator things. I'm so obsessed with those. Those are just wild to me because I can kind of make sense of them. I can kind of go, yeah, I suppose a person would design that. It's kind of like a beeper almost with a video camera on it. And
yes.
I guess it's a very chunky version of a smartphone anymore.
It's nice that the guns aren't your typical gun as well. It's like a different shape and it's just a little bit more original. But it's quite funny when you see them fastening to the holsters because it's quite complicated getting them to fit on there because of the shape. But no, I thought those were really cool.
There is something very appealing about that design. Like you say, because it was a bit different to the kind of standard kind of gun being brandished in most science fiction. I remember I certainly built more than one out of Lego sort of like back in the day, and a Lego Comlink as well.
That would do well in Lego, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that'd be a natural that one. And plus, of course, if you could get hold of a staple gun, the sort of like there you are. You there weren't that many around in my house, but occasionally you get hold of one in a shop. Actually, going back whilst we're on the subject of toys, I was particularly pleased because my particular die-cast eagle, the head, the capsule part, got quite loose and actually could come off quite easily. And so I remember as a kid being delighted to see that in the show, the front part of the eagle can detach and fly off on its own. Because I think it only happens in this episode.
But of course, in the series, it's supposed to happen. It probably wasn't supposed to happen with your toy.
Yeah. One thing that strikes me in Dragon's Domain, I don't know if it strikes you, is that when they come across this Sargasso Sea of all these drifting spaceships, they're very casual about it. You know, considering this is proof of countless alien civilizations, and nobody seems to particularly react.
Very little asked about it, you're
right. That's strange. And then the attack, and it's brilliantly done. I think the sound effects helping a lot. You get all that roaring wind and roaring alien going on there, and it's a proper sort of. If you've not seen this episode, then it's a sort of Cthulhu Lovecraftian kind of creature.
I think the actors in the flashback were putting a whole lot into that scene, and I loved it. Just the sheer amount of screaming, and a lot of times when I see the alien monsters in the 60s and 70s shows that are attacking, I'm not, that everyone's doing their best, but they're not really feeling it. But I'm like, I don't know, the way they're reacting, I believe this thing could kill several people.
It
does work, yes. So
they do help to sell it very much.
And yeah.
You inevitably have to have a little bit of stepping into them.
Well, yeah.
I think even then they sell it pretty well.
Oh, sure.
They do. They sort of sell that somehow this creature it hypnotizes them and it sort of draws them in, and then they wrap. So yeah, they kind of get away with a bit of wrapping a tentacle around themselves a bit, although they use the time-honored forward reversing the film to make the tentacles grab people. And is there anything else you'd like to say about Dragon's Domain that we've not covered yet?
I really loved the ending. I loved the way it was addressed because there's so many things they could have done with it. They could have absolutely turned it into we did say there were going to be spoilers. They could have turned it into a guilty hallucination. They could have turned it into all sorts of things. And the fact that it turned out to be this very real conflict between him and a very real monster, and the comparison to St. George and the Dragon at the end really got me. Just the idea that it's sad that he died, but he becomes a part of this story of humanity going forward. I thought that was kind of bittersweet and beautiful.
And yourself, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, my overriding thoughts now are again, as I say, of the serious elements, but also the proper monster movie elements. It all works so well together. But it strikes me that when you've got a lead regular cast of Martin Landau and Barbara Bain and Barry Morse, etc., you actually then bring in a guest star from Europe, and you give him the lion's share of the meaty business. And then you give him a crew who immediately get lost in that scene, who are actually all right. Some of them became more famous for TV roles later on, but they've all got a good body of work behind them already. They're good, strong actors, and it's almost like the guest cast. They're very much put in the driving seat, put in the spotlight, and carry it, and it works. You don't get bored and think, why am I not seeing more of Commander Coney, you're into this story and enjoying very much what is going on for this guest character of the week. I think it's very, very effective indeed. And of course, when you do that, you can end it how you want. Your guest hero doesn't have to live.
Mhm.
You know, it can happen. A bit more jeopardy.
Absolutely. I think it's a thrilling episode. It there's no longers on it. It just builds up. Like I say, it's got all that depth because it gives Commander Koenig some more depth. In fact, I think both him and Helena knew Tony earlier, so it kind of brings them more depth. And it's hugely entertaining. So, would you like to introduce your episode? What have you chosen, Kara?
I have chosen Earthbound, not to be confused with the video game of the same name. Written by Anthony Terpoloff, directed again by Charles Crichton. Earth politician Commissioner Simmons is critical of John's failure to chart a course home when an alien ship is intercepted on a collision course for the moon. Believing the 6 alien crew members inside to be dead, John inadvertently kills one and wakes the others from their stasis, including their captain, Xantor. Upon discovering that the ship is bound for Earth, Simmons sees an opportunity to achieve his goals. With one stasis pod now empty, Xantor offers one Alphen the opportunity to enter stasis for the 75-year trip back to Earth. As Xantor forges an alliance with the crew and John prepares to choose a random Alphen to return to Earth, Simmons decides to take matters into his own hands.
Yeah, it's another really strong episode. And what strikes me watching Space 1999 is they are not afraid to go quite dark and quite downbeat. Quite a lot of the first season episodes, especially, end on quite a sort of solemn note. And I don't think it gets much more solemn than the ending of this one, which I don't remember watching as a kid, but if I did, this would have really shook me up, that ending.
Yeah, it's a much more somber one. But it absolutely chilled me when I first watched it, and it just stuck with me as I proceeded forward in the series. And I thought, I think I've got my one for the podcast now.
Is he going to suffocate at the end? Or is he going to starve to death? What was good? That's quite horrible.
Yeah.
What I love about this one is the fact that it subverts expectations. You get your aliens, and they're not bad guys. Your bad guy is one of the guys who should be a good guy. So that's interesting. Christopher Lee, great guest star.
Yes.
He carries it off because he's very good at these sort of quite aristocratic, noble, solemn sort of characters. I mean, you'll know, Gareth, I'm a massive Hammer horror fan and all of that sort of thing. My favourite actor within that and without that is Peter Cushing, actually. But I have to say, I prefer this episode to the Peter Cushing episode. I think this is a really good one, and I think it suits Christopher Lee down to the ground in many ways because he's tall, imposing. You don't know what's going on behind the facade, but then that wonderful situation where it turns out, oh, he's not the monster this time. That's really nice.
I believe Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing did share a wig between their episodes, though.
I was going to raise that point.
I'm glad.
They do look very similar, don't they?
I think I read somewhere that it is the same wig and someone else also wore it in a different episode.
It was clearly the in hairstyle in outer space during 1999.
Right. So we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, but to me, what was so interesting is that it's a story that's filled with, I would argue, even science fantasy, because to me, Christopher Lee was kind of like a space elf almost. Like, all the instruments were, things he was like waving his hands over them, these crystalline things, and the stasis was just kind of unexplained magical matrices and stuff like that. And even just the way he was talking to Helena about preserving her beauty, it was like very, very fantasy type stuff. But as we mentioned, the threat is human. The threat, the story overall, without the the sci-fi trappings is very mundane. And I don't mean mundane as in boring, but I mean mundane as in non-fantastical. And there was something very intriguing to me about that. That again, like you were saying beforehand, the alien is not the enemy. The human who's been there the whole time is the enemy, and he's a very he's a politician. He's a very normal, recognizable type person. And there was just, amidst everything else, there was something very interesting and very sort of standout about a story that took place that way, that was just about greed and power on a very human level.
I think that perhaps many shows would have had that Roy Dotrice character as an ongoing villain.
Uh-huh. He felt very Sheriff of Nottingham to me, just in his look.
Yeah. The end of every episode, you win again, Koenig. That's all.
Yeah, he got his comeuppance in one story. I thought it was interesting too that they made it very clear that Xantor, Christopher Lee's character, because they were discussing afterwards, like, oh, is this something that Xantor did deliberately? And Koenig saying, I think that Simmons just didn't give him time. But I would argue that it's about 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. When Simmons is like, now you get in your stasis pod first, Xantor doesn't go, oh, Commissioner, you must understand that we must do your special matrix so that you do not awaken. He just kind of goes, okay. And,
Of course, the great irony is that if he'd have just been patient and done it the right way, he was getting a free ticket anyway.
That was such a great little sting at the end. And just the look on Koenig's face when he was like, it was his name.
Yeah.
But so fascinating
remember this watching at home.
Fascinating that Koenig made no secret of the fact that he would love to send Simmons away. And he was like, I want to be fair to other people who might legitimately want to go back to Earth no matter what. If I had my way, you'd be out there now because I just don't want to deal with you anymore. And but just despite his own feelings and despite the fact that everything sort of, everyone would have been better off without him, was kind of the feeling. He was like, no, I still got to do this. Simply saying, all right, you can go because I want you gone, demonstrates that being a jerk and being a bully gets you what you want.
Actually, now you mentioned Koenig, I think it's probably a good time to talk a little bit about Martin Landau. And, I think it's a really interesting performance. I suppose I think I've come to appreciate more over time that he's playing this weight of responsibility. That he's got the responsibility of all these lives on him, and it makes him quite a sort of serious man. I think at the time, I seem to remember there was some criticism back when the show first came out, because people were used to that kind of Captain Kirk kind of more sort of dashing, quirky, quipping kind of hero. And I think it's only later now we've seen things like Babylon 5 and other non-sci-fi TV dramas. I think appreciate it's a very subtle. It's actually quite a subtle performance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they did battle to keep it serious, didn't they? And and Barbara Bain really wanted that, and it give the man what he wants. I mean, he's been directed by Hitchcock. You've got to give him a respect.
He knows it. I mean, yeah, there are plenty of stories over the production of both him and Barbara Bain, questioning things in the script, wanting things rewritten. And generally what comes out of it is, in most cases, it wasn't an ego thing of kind of make me look good. It was more, let's make these episodes as good as possible.
Yeah, and I think they were right. They fought, because of course there were changes as they went into the second series, but they fought for maintaining some of what made the first so brilliant. I have no objections to the new people that came in, but when at the end of this particular episode, you see the whole team sort of having their opinions, having their vote about whether or not they should let Simmons go or not, and they feel like a real community, and they feel that they all belong there and all have their say. And I love that. And
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
that's something that those two key players wanted to maintain, and quite right too.
yes, I think it does benefit. There it is a very well cast show. I don't know if asking if anyone sort of like stands out for you amongst that supporting cast.
Just, you mean in general across the show?
Yeah, generally across the series.
I mean, I very early on, I was a fan of Barry Morse
Mm.
as Bergman. He was a lot of fun. But that tends to be my favorite character type across any similar sci-fi show, so that's no surprise. But
Yeah, but there's
yeah.
there's a wonderful point in when they first investigate in Christopher Lee's spacecraft, and the camera just pans across, and he's not saying anything. He's just looking at all the equipment and running his hand across it with
Yeah,
such a look of enthusiasm and intensity. It's perfect.
I love it.
Mm.
Yeah, he's so great.
He is. He is a very welcome presence, and it's interesting because he's not playing it in an obviously I'm a nutty eccentric kind of scientist, but he's a lovely avuncular presence.
He feels like a very real scientific mind. He doesn't feel like a caricature. He feels like, and again, part of my life, I look at him and I'm like, yeah, this is what someone in his position would actually act like.
Hmm.
With all sort of I think in a lot of ways, the most positive traits of that, without a lot of the more standoffish elements that you might find with a very focused scientific mind. So a very positive and friendly presence while also being that very analytical and excited about the analytics kind of mind.
I just think they work well together, and it's like, yeah, I would have said Victor Bergman as well was a
Hmm.
standard, but then you've got that wonderful contrast between him and the more archetypal hero pilot Alan Tate, and it's just they've all got the bit to play. And what struck me looking back over these is then you look at Prentice Hancock, who's basically a desk jockey. He does,
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, if you look at other shows, and I love Doctor Who, I very much love Doctor Who, but if you have guests appearing as that equivalent sort of character, they sound like they're reading their lines off the side of a cornflake packet.
Mm.
You're listening to Prentice Hancock, and he sounds like he really is the person that does that,
Mm.
and he invests something in it, so that you imagine sometimes you'd look at the script and think, well, I've not got a lot to do there, have I? But every performance is very real. It's convincing.
One of the things I really like about the show in general is the fact that so much of this is a journey. And like I said, I like to see how people live in these sci-fi spaces. And that's something you really see in Space 1999, where this is home for the foreseeable future. Might as well get used to it until you find somewhere, which of course being one of the conflicts of Earthbound. But seeing how all these people interact and seeing sort of just how invested they are in everything and how much a part of the space and of each other's lives they are.
Mm.
So as I just think of them as this cohesive unit, almost a family, and I love that.
Mm. Okay, well, we'll move on now. Now, since you've both gone for season one stories, and I can fully understand that, I felt honor bound that I had to choose something from season two. We could talk about it. And I think I've gone for a show that's in many ways is quintessentially year two. And I don't think it's quite, I came to it, it's one of those, I came to it having heard how bad it was. I don't think it's as bad as its rep. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about The Beta Cloud, which is written by a studio. Well, it's written by the producer of the second series, Fred Freeberger, under the pen name Charles Woodgrove, and directed by Robert Lynn. As the moon comes into the range of a giant gas cloud, most of the inhabitants of Moonbase are hospitalized by an energy-sapping illness, including John and Helena. An eagle sent to investigate the cloud returns carrying a powerful, seemingly unstoppable monster. As the alien rampages through the Moonbase, a glowing pyramid appears within the cloud, and an alien voice informs the Alphans that they have sent their servant to take Moonbase's life support system, not caring that this will kill the humans. It's left to Tony Vadeshi to lead a skeleton crew of survivors in a desperate defense of the Moonbase. So I'm going to turn over to Kara now. So what did you think of the Beta Cloud?
So, like I said, I'm still pushing through season 1. So this was a jump into season 2. I did some very quick sort of Wikipedia to acquaint myself with the new characters and what was going on and why everything was so different. But I could very much feel the jolt of difference. It's not something I, disliked in any objective way. It was very different. But I kind of saw what I've seen people say about it being more action oriented. Having a character who is legitimately alien in the mix was interesting. From a specifically that episode standpoint, I realized about halfway through that it really boiled down to one mystery amidst everything else, and then a lot of action around the mystery. I felt a little odd by the end when sort of they figured it out and then it was over. But all things considered, it was very interesting from kind of a getting to know the characters as a newcomer to season 2. And there were cool monsters in it, which I love cool monsters. I will admit that when Maya first transformed to fight the creature, I was very new to that, and I honestly thought she was doing the Bugs Bunny protocol. I thought she was turning into like a lady monster to distract the monster, and then she jumps on the back. I'm like, okay, yeah, that actually makes more sense. She's fighting him.
And how about yourself, Ian?
Do you know what? I couldn't remember having watched this until I watched it again, and then I realized, yes, I had watched it at the time. And it is very much once we've got our mystery, once we've got our threat, it's kind of repetition, shall we say. There's an awful lot of here it goes again. It's throwing a few people around. It suffers from perhaps that thing where it shouldn't have been lit quite as well at times. And Dave Prowse, considering he'd played Frankenstein's monster twice by then, really should have had a better shambling walk at times. Sometimes having to stroll down to the corner shop or something like that. He was kind of quite leisurely in his walking. Well, when Maya turned into those bizarre creatures, they still freak me out a little bit. I always try when I'm trying to sort of watch in context or just get into it. I kind of think, well, if this suddenly burst through the door whilst I was sat at home, how would I feel about it? And there are certain things where you think, well, I'd just laugh. But I think that creature just looked properly malicious, and quite scary. And I quite like the physicality of it leaping on this monster's back. And it was fun. It was fun. But I think out of the 3 episodes that we've discussed, I think it was, for me, the lesser of the 3. But I know at the time I would have absolutely loved it, and I must confess that I absolutely love watching it still. I really did. And I've no objections to the new characters. I like all of the new characters brought in, but I still question the wisdom of losing the characters that we did.
Yes, I think that's quite fair. This is actually an episode I remember watching as a kid. I definitely remember the David Prowse sort of frog stroke bear sort of creature that comes out. And I think my main problem is, like you said, actually, you summed it up when you said it's overlit. I think if early on we doused all the lights a bit, which is completely legitimate, it could easily be explained in the script, it would have been much more effective. And it's such a shame. It's very, very obviously a man, what as you say, walking about in a monster suit. Really, there's no real choreography. I doubt he would have been told in the. I think at this point they would have assumed David Prowse, having played quite a few monsters by this time in his career, they just would have, you know, just get on with it, do your thing, David. But I think it does have a sense of tension to it, and the way that they keep trying and they keep failing to stop it. And I quite like the twist at the end that they've been going more and more powerful and bigger to try and stop the monster, and then in the end they stop it by going small, and Maya turns into a bee. Don't even think about the kind of science involved in this or any kind of mass exchange that's going
Very,
on
very
here.
heavy bee.
Very, very. No wonder it actually, yeah, couldn't think of it. No wonder it's like a really dense bee passing around inside it. One thing, I mean, and whenever I watch something that's a bit failing, I think, and I don't know if this is the same of you two, your brain starts thinking, how do I fix this? And
Oh yeah.
oh yeah. And I think one thing I would have done was be to cut the alien's voice and have them just as a mysterious, what are they doing? And then the Alphans themselves work out, oh, he's after the life support. Because when that voice comes on, I think I was right, I was making notes. I made a note that the alien's voice sounds, he sounds a bit like a salesman. He has that kind of
Yeah.
and that's not all, type of voice going on. Whereas, they thought they could have done it either put a bit of vocoder on it or gone down the more sort of hissy sort of. But again, it's that very American view. I don't know how much of the Outer Limits you two have seen, the 60s series. What's striking the Outer Limits is that virtually every alien talks in this very authoritative voice. I think it's the same guy doing the voice on nearly every episode. They all talk in this very declaiming voice. And this is it's a bit like that, the alien voice in here, except not quite as stentorian as that. But yeah, and so I would have, turned the lights down, made the aliens a bit more ambiguous, and I think it would have been a stronger episode. Having said that, there are things I like about it. For a start, it gives Sienna Merton a lot more to do than normal. And that is like, apparently she had actually left at the start of season 2, and then a few weeks later was invited back on the series, which she well, they are booking actress, so she agreed to do that. But she did say, "Can I have a bit more to do?" And this is definitely an episode that feels like we're going to give her. So she gets to briefly fight the monster. She's looking after the medical bay after Helena succumbs in real life due to the couple going on holiday for a couple of weeks. At this point, that's why they succumb early to the disease.
We're just so tired we got to go on vacation.
Definitely. In fact, at this point, in order to save budget, all the episodes are made sort of double banked. They're making 2 episodes at a time at this point, which is why some episodes have got a lot of Koenig in them, and some episodes have got a lot of Helena in them. So you can see that this is the show that Fred Freiberger wants to make. This is almost, I can almost imagine, I've no evidence that he did this, but I wouldn't be surprised if he sent prospective writers this script or this synopsis and say, this is the kind of thing I want to be doing now. So like lots of action, lots of fret, and it ends on a jokey scene. That's the other thing I was saying. All series 1, nearly every episode ends on a a sort of ambiguous, we've won, but we're the losers,
Quite a somber
really.
note. Yeah.
Yeah.
And whereas nearly every episode in season 2 has a more Star Trek-y, a joke at the end and everyone chortles sort of ending.
Here's the thing about Fred. So they brought him in to jazz the show up because they brought him in to do that on the final series of Star Trek. They brought him in to do that on the final series of the $6 Million Man or something like that, or a series. And you start thinking, well, how many final series did he have? Did he kill everything off?
Oh no.
It is,
I don't know.
and he didn't improve his record because he went on and did the Superboy TV series
Oh.
Oh, well, yeah,
after this.
Oof. Okay.
absolute winner.
But like I said, I sort of chose this episode partly because I think it's actually an entertaining episode, despite its flaws. But this is probably more a question for Ian than because you've obviously not seen lots of them yet, Kara. But
Yeah.
I mean, are there, thinking about season 2, are there any stories that particularly stand out?
The one that always does, simply because I think I missed it at the time, was I like the very first episode of the series because we get, in effect, the origin story for Maya. So when as I said, I missed a few episodes clearly of the series when first shown. So I was kind of, what? Who's she? Where's she come from? And then eventually seeing the first episode of that second series where we get her backstory, that's brilliant. Added bonus, Brian Blessed is a father. Can't go wrong. That was quite nice. However, I don't know if it seems a bit odd that she becomes so influential a member of the team for the rest of the series, where she's kind of telling people what's what. And you think, well, hold on a minute, you've only been here 2 seconds. You know, that was a little bit odd, but I like the character. I presume she gets everything she needs to know about the animal she turns into from the minds of people around her, because otherwise, how would she know what a mouse looked like? How would she know what they look like? And so on and so forth. But yeah, that's one that stands out for me. But after that, I mean, there's an awful lot of sort of science fantasy romping about, really, and kind of, I just enjoy that. I enjoy that, and I get the feeling that as a kid at the time, I would have enjoyed that more than some aspects of Series 1. Whereas now as an adult, it's the other way around.
I think I agree with you there on that. I mean, I don't know, Carol, you might have possibly seen with a Mystery Science Theatre because they edited together several episodes of Space 1999 into TV movies.
Oh.
And one of them was Cosmic Princess, which combines the episode Ian was talking about, Maya's origin, with another episode called Spacewalk.
That must, yeah. See, that's what I watched when I was growing up, was Mystery Science Theater. My uncle would bring over VHS recordings of it because we didn't have cable at the time. And he would I didn't understand half the jokes. I didn't know where these movies were coming from. So somewhere in the back of my brain, that might explain why she looked so familiar when I started that episode. Somewhere in the back of my subconscious, I remember that.
Actually, one thing I just wanted to go back to with Earthbound and also Dragon's Domain that I forgot to mention, I was going to mention, is Charles Crichton, the director. He does an excellent job on both episodes, and it's not surprising because it's quite amazing that this man who was one of the big directors of the British film industry, and now he's working on Space 1999.
Yeah, all of those Ealing greats, and then
I mean, I don't know if the name Charles Crichton means a lot to, or whether I'm putting on my movie geek hat here. But, he'd done several significant British films back in the 50s. He'd done things like Hue and Cry and The Lavender Hill Mob.
Oh, okay.
And,
wow.
And then, of course, the British film industry goes legs up. And then and he and a lot of similar directors of his ilk it's ITC were really lucky that suddenly all this talent was available to make their film TV series.
Nice that at the end of the career, he got a fish called Wanda as well, didn't he?
Mm.
Oh,
So
he was a fish called Wanda?
Yeah,
yeah,
he did. Yeah.
Oh, okay. It
so he
all comes around now.
started off in great films, TV, ITC programs like that, Space 999, then back onto very successful film again. So that's nice.
That is very good. I'm glad he didn't have the Orson Welles experience. Although there is, in some ways, it is it's almost you couldn't write a better arc than that to go from Citizen Kane to Transformers the movie.
Covering all bases, though.
Yeah.
I think somebody like Charles Crichton, though, it's good that he was working on film and not on video. Because who
That
knows?
is good.
Who knows? Most people probably did struggle a little bit when it was just all shot on video. It's got that cheap look, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's all good. And I always think as well the sort of the stock shots of all the effects that are obviously in absolutely every episode.
Mm.
It takes some skill to drop them in the right place and make them look as if they're there. And all of those episodes we've been going over, I thought, certainly the Crichton ones, they fitted in very well indeed.
Well, we're coming down, so I think the time has come to ask you for some final thoughts on Space 1999. So I'm going to start with Kara, if you like. How you feel about Space 1999?
I love it. As soon as I saw the first episode, I was completely invested. I regretted not being into it sooner. We've done our bit here, but I'm going to keep watching because I watch an episode in the evening and I love it. So, and I'm probably going to be looking into other stuff adjacent that I may have missed being mostly a Star Trek family growing up.
I'm delighted to hear that. I always feel a bit guilty if I force people to watch something that they come back.
I trust your judgment.
Thank you. And Ian, how's looking back at Space 1999?
Well, I've been inspired to read this. I'm going to read this again now. Look, I
Ooh.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. Just for the benefit of he has just held up a Space 1999 paperback.
A novelization from 1975 in very good condition. I don't even know. I think it cost me about 20p. Do you know what? I love my Doctor Who. I very much enjoyed Star Trek growing up. I loved on British TV again. I loved Blake 7. Space 1999 looked in very good shape a lot of the time when you compare to some of the others. And yeah, I really, really enjoy it still. Is it one of my favorites? I don't know. I'm going to now start a mission of going through the whole lot. And I can do that with some programs. For other programs, I might need a rest. I don't know. I get the feeling that I'm just going to enjoy the ride with this one because it's an absolute joy going back to it. And all the things we said, the great effects. Yeah, I like the Anderson type effects and stuff like that, but I far prefer the live action stuff. Even as a kid, it wasn't really my thing. But with stuff like Space 1999 or UFO or the film, if you ever saw it, Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, also known as Doppelganger, I think.
It's a very good film. I can recommend that.
Yeah. And I think live action, well filmed with those effects and ideas, absolute winner. Yeah, great show.
Well, we just got time for me to return to Earth and talk to you a bit about, because you are both very busy people. And what are you? I'll start with Kara. I'll say, what are you up to at the moment?
Well, I'm always writing for Crunchyroll and Otaku USA for those who are interested in anime, live action Japanese entertainment. Look me up there. I also recently contributed to the Essential Anime Guide, which covers dozens of influential titles in depth, starting from Astro Boy all the way up to modern day. On the writing side of things, a lot of what I've got coming up is being scheduled out by the publishers, so I don't actually know which titles are coming out at the time of this, but I have a lot of things coming out in 2024. Follow me at karadennison.com. I will announce things as they come out, some books, some short stories, some more experimental things that I'm doing with friends that I hope people enjoy. keep an eye on the site, and I hope you like what I've got coming this year.
Cool stuff. And I'm looking forward to it. And there will be links in the text accompanying this episode. And how about yourself, Ian?
Yeah, I'm busy with both fact and fiction. Still writing and part of the editorial team of We Belong Dead magazine, and the next issue is due out soon, where I've written overviews of some of the lesser Lugosi films, and also looked at the times that Charles Bronson sort of drifted over more to the creepy suspense, horror, or into the supernatural. It was more than you might think. We've also got a new book coming out, Euro Horror, all about the European horror scene throughout the years. I think written round about double figures of chapters on various films, a lot of which feature Barbara Steele, so that was great. Also got stuff coming out. I've got articles in Cinema of the 70s, Cinema of the 80s, and The Dark Side. And then for fiction, I am now co-editing with my Welsh friend Andrew Llewellyn the BHF books of horror stories, which raise money for various charities, very much based on the British pan books of horror from the 70s and 80s. We got one released at Christmas time, and it's all Christmas themed. So if people buy it now, they might want to save it till next December. But that's just come out, available via Amazon. And Andrew and I are also doing our own writing stuff. We've got a new collection coming out this year, hopefully, which will be 2 novellas each. So there'll be 4 novellas, 2 written by each of us, and it's called Playgrounds After Dark.
Ooh.
Wow, that's a
Very
lot.
nice.
I'm gonna look forward to reading some of those. Well, it only remains for me to say thank you very much for joining me today. I had a great time. It's been great to have you both here. And I look forward to talking to you. Yeah, I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you very much.
It's been great.
I'd like to thank Kara and Ian for taking the time to be part of this episode, and you at home for listening. Until next time, goodbye for now. Very British Futures is hosted and produced by Gareth Preston and features guests Kara Dennison and Ian Taylor. Follow the show on Twitter at FuturesVery, or visit our Facebook page. If you'd like to get in touch with suggestions and questions, you can email us at verybritishfuturespodcast@gmail.com. We'll be back soon.